Good morning, Wabash. Hey, Carter. Today our talk is going to be by Dean Welch. Dean Welch graduated Magna Cum Laude from Wabash in 1999. He was also elected into Phi Beta Kappa and graduated with a Spanish major, psychology minor, and completed secondary education licensure in Spanish. While on campus, Dean Welch was a member of Delta Tau Delta fraternity. After Wabash, he taught high school Spanish for 7 years. 4 of those years were at Crawfordsville High School. During that time, he also earned a master's degree in education from IU and the University of Salamanca in Spain. Sent around second language acquisition and classroom pedagogy, in 2006, he returned to Wabash to work in admissions for 5 years, and then the Department of Education Studies for 2 years before serving in his current role as Associate Dean of Students. When not engaging in all things Wabash, he enjoys running, traveling, and going to Colts games, and spending time with his wife Kelli and his 3 children, Madi, Blake, and Aaron. Here to give his talk titled, Wabash Always Meets, Dean Welch.
Good morning, Wabash. Last time I was up here was in 2002 when I married my wife, Kelli, and that's worked out okay. 12 years of marriage and 3 healthy children, for which we're very blessed. However, after today, let's only hope for more years of marriage and no more children. I considered giving this talk in Spanish, thinking I could be the first to deliver a chapel talk in another language. You know, serving as a pioneer of sorts in our beloved Pioneer Chapel. However, given that I have a captive audience, at least I hope so, and that my wife and kids might actually listen to me for once, I decided to deliver my talk in English. In preparation for today, and I'm not sure why I did this, I met with Patrick Rezick. When I shared with him my title, he responded with, Wabash always meets expectations, to which I was disappointed because, as we all know, Wabash exceeds expectations, not just meets expectations. We continued to discuss how I would know if the talk was going well or not so well. We decided that people on their phones could be a good thing, for they might be tweeting, Facebooking, or even yakking about the talk. Having mentioned yik yak, now would be a good time to give you a sense of the ways, okay, the one way, the only time, in which it helped me do my work in the Dean of Students office. About a week ago, okay, longer than that, my wife and I were leaving the house. She was driving and I was browsing through yik yak. Someone had yacked about an ambulance at the Allen Center. I arrived just in time to see the paramedics lifting our student into the ambulance. I was able to talk to the student and then to his father over the phone. However, and I've shared this with some of you already, if I would have taken a screenshot of that yak about the ambulance, it would have been preceded by someone defecating in a mailbox. I hope that's not true. Followed by someone complaining about toilet paper quality or lack of on campus. Now that I think of it, maybe those 2 yaks are connected. And perhaps that's the best lesson learned. Don't think about or give too much credit to such social media. As Hezekiah said, I graduated Wabash in '99, Spanish major, psych minor. I was just 1 course shy of the psych major, smart enough to avoid comprehensive exams in 2 areas. Not only did I nearly double major, I also studied abroad in Spain and completed secondary licensure in Spanish, all within 8 semesters. Many ask how I was able to do so much within just 4 years. I didn't even need the Ed Studies 9th semester. It all started with 2 meetings. After all, Wabash always meets. One meeting was with Dr. D, when much to his dismay, he discovered that unlike many others from my small hometown of Winchester, I would buck the trend and not major in chemistry. When I dropped Chem 111 for Chem 101, Dr. D would help me out, or single me out by introducing Part B of the lab as the second part, reminding everyone, or just me, that Part A was the first section and Part 3 would be labeled as C. Thanks to a really good lab partner, the support, help, humor, and perhaps ridicule from Dr. D, and a lot of my own hard work, I ended up with an A in the course, perhaps bringing true meaning to Wabash Always Fights. Like many men of Wabash, I realized I wasn't going to med school. That meeting with Dr. D was soon followed by a meeting with Dr. Deb Butler, who at the time was the only faculty member in the teacher ed program, now the Department of Ed Studies. I shared with her my desire to double major, to study abroad, and to license in Spanish ed, all within 4 years. In just a half an hour and an entire eraser later, Dr. Butler magically outlined the next 3.5 years of my life and more. And those are just two of many meetings which shaped my future and perhaps the title of today's talk, Wabash Always Meets. Admittedly, however, for those of you who know me well, my title is slightly more loaded and a bit more cynical. After all, as baseball coach Corey Stevens knows, and others, we're at an institution which calls meetings to plan for meetings. We also have a committee on committees. Kevin Andrews, that's for you. Hope you're here. However, I must be careful not to dismiss or overlook the value of meetings. In fact, Ryan Ancelone originally asked me to give today's chapel talk, and while I won't take sole responsibility for his matriculation to Wabash, it all started with a series of meetings. While attending a national conference, I met his high school guidance counselor, who then invited me to Columbus Academy. Nearly 1 year later, while I was in Columbus for a college fair, I reached out to the guidance counselor, and he promised to have a group of students ready to meet with me. One such student was Ryan. And despite his initial interest in engineering, I knew that he belonged at Wabash. Soon after meeting Ryan, however, I left admissions to join the Department of Ed Studies. But I didn't leave Wabash, and I didn't leave Ryan. As an alumnus and staff member, I was so excited to see him join the Wabash class of 2016. It's been a real pleasure to see Ryan excel within so many areas, especially within the Sphinx Club and Phi Gamma Delta fraternity. He certainly confirmed that my original impression that he was, is, and always will be a Wabash man. When I reflect on that national conference, it would have been so easy for me to have remained quiet and not networked with other counselors. While in Columbus, and I could have just attended the college fair and not gone out of my way to visit Columbus Academy. But at Wabash, we don't take the easy way out. You've all heard it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Such expression applies to all aspects of Wabash, meetings included. While I could dedicate my chapel talk to the many meetings and encounters with prospective students and their parents during my time in admissions, I'll share just 2 more meetings. My first year in admissions, I recall the eldest Burrish brother, Tyler, visiting in November for Top 10 Day. I'm sure that football coaches and faculty members secured Tyler's decision to attend Wabash, but as his admissions counselor, and now knowing the strong legacy of Burrish boys that would follow, I'd like to think that my lunchtime meeting with parents Bob and Kathy played a part. I was also Cody's admissions counselor, and Bob tried to get Wabash to offer him a buy one, get one free sale on tuition, room and board. With Ethan and now Dylan matriculating to Wabash, such offer would now be buy four, get one free. Perhaps that would secure Seth's matriculation to Wabash, the 5th Burrish brother. So that you all know, because Bob and Kathy are such avid Wabash supporters and believe in this place so much, they've been active recruiters for Wabash beyond their family and within their own corner of Southwest Pure Michigan as well. Another on-the-road admission meeting also occurred in Michigan, this time in the northern area of Traverse City and Suttons Bay. While visiting the area, I had the opportunity to meet alumnus Dick Ristine, Wabash class of 1941, and the last student he would refer to Wabash, Andrew Palmer, class of 2011. When I visited Suttons Bay High School and met with Drew, I gave my typical admissions talk. Drew's eyes illuminated. I knew I had captured his interest. After my talk, students left, but Drew remained. so that we would have the opportunity to talk one-on-one. Just a week or so later, Drew and his father would make the 7-hour trek to campus, and Drew would later join the Wabash class of 2011. After visiting Suttons Bay High School that day, I met Mr. Rustine at his favorite place in town, the 45th Parallel Cafe. He was certainly a regular at this place, but our meeting didn't stop there. Despite my additional appointments in nearby Traverse City, Mr. Rustine insisted that I accompany him to the local hardware store, where he would go on to purchase a new snow shovel. Being in Michigan, that's the thing you do. At the hardware store, I would also have the opportunity to meet Drew's mom, who worked there. And just when I thought I could leave Suttons Bay and honor my commitments in Traverse City, Mr. Rustine had one more request. I believe his exact words, "Before you get out of town, I know you got to take a leak, so stop by my house." At his home, Mr. Rustine showed me his office. It was lined with multiple certificates for the many times he was named a Sagamore of the Wabash. However, it was all the Wabash memorabilia for which Mr. Rustine, former Lieutenant Governor of Indiana, was most proud. In our conversation, Dick shared with me not only his hopes for Andrew to attend Wabash, but that he would live long enough to see Andrew graduate. Unfortunately, Mr. Rustine passed away in the summer of 2009, and Drew didn't graduate until 2011. These meetings, not typical 8 to 4:30 meetings, are great reminders of why we go that extra step, why we put ourselves out there, never knowing where such meetings will take us or others. About a week ago, a couple years ago, in a conversation, a meeting of sorts, a faculty member shared with me that if he were dean, he would cancel all meetings. And while I think we would all agree that Dean Feller is doing a remarkable job, perhaps this is an idea to adopt. If you're curious to know who said this, let me give you a hint. He could have equally started the previous sentence with "Si yo fuera decano." During our conversation, he continued to say that if we would all just do our jobs really well, we wouldn't need to meet. While Dr. Dan Rogers was speaking in jest, and with a bit of exaggeration, I would agree that he was on to something. And while we would all certainly welcome less meetings, I don't think any of us would advocate for an environment in which Wabash never meets. When I think of a Wabash without meetings, I'm reminded of the classic Spanish work, The House of Bernarda Alba by Federico Garcia Lorca. His work functions as a good reminder of the perils that ensue when silence reigns. The play centers around an 8-year period of mourning for Bernarda, the widow, and the mother of 5 daughters. She enters the play in Act 1 and closes the play in Act 3 with the same word, silencio. The play opens with the death of her husband, and it also concludes, and this is a spoiler alert for my freshman tutorial students, concludes with the death of one of her daughters by suicide. It was Bernarda's reign of silence, repression, and isolation, parallel to that of Spain's dictator Francisco Franco, that caused such tragedy in Lorca's work and within Spain itself. This work is just one of many that reminds me of the importance of communication, liberation, and community. Keeping in mind Jeff Drury's chapel talk from a few weeks ago, I'm reminded of the privilege that I have, that we all have, to attend meetings and to make a difference in the lives of others. While I admit that I sometimes reluctantly approach yet another meeting, especially during the lunch hour, I'm trying to change my perspective. It's during these meetings, our many, many meetings, that we reflect on the Wabash of yesteryear in order to build a stronger Wabash for tomorrow and the next generation of Wabash men. Whenever I attended workshops at national conferences while in admissions or ed studies, I always thought that I should be the one facilitating them, or certainly someone else from Wabash. I seldom felt as if I was learning anything new. While this was frustrating, I found great comfort and pride in feeling as if we at Wabash had already figured it out and that we were ahead of others. I think it was Dr. Michelle Pittard in Ed Studies who was able to bring me down from my all-knowing pillar of superiority. She shared with me that if she can attend a session and leave with just one new idea, one new perspective, or one new approach, then she considers it a success and worthy of her time. Now, more than ever, this is my mindset as I attend meetings. Whether at a conference, on campus, off campus, formal or informal, I realize that one new idea, one new consideration might allow us to move from good to great. In the book, Good to Great, Jim Collins shares with readers that the biggest enemy of great is good. He writes that we don't have great schools principally because we have good schools. We don't have great government principally because we have good government. Few people attain great lives in large part because it is just so easy to settle for a good life. The vast majority of companies never become great precisely because the vast majority become good, and that is the main problem, end quote. Not long after returning to campus to work in admissions, I wanted to become more active in Delta Tau Delta fraternity. With that in mind, I attended a DELT alumni conference in Cincinnati for alumni who shared such mutual interest. During the conference, I arrived early to one of the lunches. Not wanting to sit alone and knowing that I rarely meet a stranger, I sat next to an older man wearing an M&M watch. I must admit, I found this comforting while a bit odd at the same time. Comforting in the fact that he must be nice if he's wearing an M&M watch. And my daughter, last night when I was giving the speech, she asked me if I meant the candy or the wrapper. I'm talking about the candy. So I sit down at this table, there's this guy wearing an M&M watch, and so it's comforting because he must be nice, right? He's wearing an M&M watch, but a little bit odd because he's mid-50s wearing that watch. We made general small talk about, of all things, the weather. It was clear that the conversation wasn't going anywhere, and I had arrived early, so there were plenty of other seats available. Just as I was about to change tables, he told me he graduated from Ball State. This captured my interest because I grew up just 20 minutes from Ball State. As it turned out, he did as well, and yes, we were from the same hometown. Long story short, he had attended high school with my parents and owned my great-grandmother's house that was later owned by my best friend. So here's this man with whom I thought I had nothing in common, and we discovered so much in common, including his home, which played host to so many special moments for both me and my mom. Oh, and by the way, the M&M watch, that was because of his very successful and lucrative career with Mars Incorporated, the maker of M&Ms. This near-missed opportunity relates well to another book, Never Eat Alone. Here's just one of many quotes that emphasizes the importance of why Wabash always meets. Relationships are all there is. Everything in the universe only exists because it is in relationship to everything else. Nothing exists in isolation. We have to stop pretending we are individuals that can go it alone, end quote. With this thought in mind, I'm reminded of the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, ACTFL's 5 standards, all beginning with a C: cultures, connections, comparisons, communication, and communities. ACTFL represents standards, these standards, as they should, interlocking as each one overlaps with another, much like you see the Olympic rings. Your liberal arts education has hopefully taught you that you don't exist in isolation and that events don't exist in isolation. Again, consider the tragedy in Lorca's work or Spain's decades of struggles before ushering in the world from outside. Because you don't exist in isolation, and as the book says, you're not in this alone, this is my plug for the Academic Centers of Excellence. Meet with them. Meet with your faculty, staff, and coaches. Meet with your administrators, and most importantly, meet with the guys in your living units, for we all know that your peers can be your best educators. My own matriculation to Wabash happened as a series of meetings and the help of others. In the fall of '94, I attended a meeting at my high school to meet with admissions counselor Lance Moore, Wabash class of '91. This is the view book that Lance shared with me, or is at least one of the many, many pieces of mail that Wabash sent to me. The admissions marketing line at the time was guts, brains, spirit, strength, Wabash. With this tagline in mind, I seriously don't know how we seriously recruited serious students to Wabash without our seriously materials of today. Seriously. By the way, during my senior year, I always carried this view book with me. I took great pride in not only my decision to attend Wabash, but in sharing it with others as well. I guess it's no surprise that I would later work for admissions all 4 years as a student on campus, including 3 summers in Crawfordsville, and then for 5 years as an alumnus. Wabash often talks about close student, faculty, staff relationships, which are another way in which Wabash always meets. I certainly recall playing Trivial Pursuit and perhaps enjoying an adult beverage on the front porch of 16 Harry Friedman, which at the time housed faculty. At Wabash, students and even alumni often reminisce about drinking alcohol with faculty and staff. However, I would ask that we all stop and think critically about such activity. When that becomes the focus on which we pride ourselves, we've missed the point. We've missed the opportunity to capture a unique student-faculty-staff relationship and experience. When meeting with student leaders, I often discuss with them that while alcohol might become part of the event or social gathering, it shouldn't become the event. Such an example of this would be time spent with Dr. David Blix. While he often stopped by the Delt House, I often visited his office frequently as well. Many of you know the multiple colors of ink for which Dr. Blix is infamous. When he returned graded papers, I was sure to meet with him right after class. While I was helping my girlfriend, wife now, on a paper when she was in college, I discovered myself doing the same thing as Dr. Blix. She asked me, "How did you become such a great writer?" I had 2 answers for her, Wabash and Dr. Blix. 3 years after graduating Wabash, Dr. Blix played the organ at our wedding right here in the chapel, and Dr. David Timmerman, former professor of rhetoric, now dean of the faculty at Monmouth College, officiated our wedding ceremony. Without our multiple meetings through the years, neither of the 2 Davids would have been part of our special day. Before such wedding could take place, I had to meet my bride. Coming to Wabash College for Men, I certainly didn't anticipate meeting my wife here. However, while at Wabash, I worked part-time at a local grocery store. Landing a job, however, wasn't easy and, of course, involved a series of meetings. I initially met with the manager of then Crawford's grocery store, which no longer exists. It used to be located diagonal to Theta Delta Chi. To apply, I simply had to write my phone number on the back of a receipt. Like a good Wally, however, I would, of course, submit an official resume as well. Despite having a resume and 3 years' experience working at a grocery store back home, Crawford's wouldn't hire me. They thought that I was overqualified and probably just wouldn't fit in. So I arranged a meeting with the manager at County Market, or Townie Market. The manager there appreciated my willingness and assertiveness to meet and hired me immediately. It was this series of meetings that not only secured work at the grocery store, but gave me the opportunity to meet my wife as well. Such persistence on my part serves as another good example for Wabash always fights and Wabash always meets. In a conversation with Gary Phillips, my neighbor, the other day, we talked about the ways in which Wabash students bounce back in the face of failure or rejection. I'll share with you the same story that I shared with him. My story, of course, returns to my struggles within Division I. While taking finite math for distribution with legendary Professor Dr. David Wilson, I scored a 23 on our first exam. Yes, 23%, 23 out of 100. After such a not-so-stellar score, I knew that I needed to meet with Dr. Wilson multiple times if I was going to survive finite math. Luckily for me, I knew Dr. Wilson was teaching himself Spanish. As I entered his office, he had Telemundo blasting through the TV, coupled with Spanish music on the radio, a desk covered in Spanish vocab cards and verb conjugation tables, a Spanish major's dream. With this, I saw an opportunity to bring truth to the common claim that faculty can learn so much from students. Wabash always meets. In this case, Welch and Wilson always met. I learned finite math, and Dr. Wilson learned Spanish in true Wabash spirit. Now, as a staff member, it's my turn to learn from our students and to be encouraged by them in the classroom and beyond. Just the other day, Ryan Garataz inspired me to follow through with a post-lunch run, which sounds odd. Those words shouldn't go together, a post-lunch run. That lunch included nachos and pizza. I'm still not sure this was the best idea, but with Ryan working in the Allen Center at the time, I assured him that he was responsible for any and all cleanup if the nachos and pizza were to resurface. In Spanish 102, Division I-minded Luke Knudsen would challenge me and the entire Spanish teaching profession for the way in which we visually represent the imperfect and preterite verb tense. I'm still not convinced of Luke's argument, but he certainly has me re-examining not only my approach, but again, that of the entire profession as well. Also in Spanish 102, Jeremy Minor and George Vinnie Hawkes coined the term sandal verbs, similar to shoe, boot, or stem-changing verbs. This time, however, they were referring to those pesky preterite third-person singular and plural stem changers like pédir, dormir, and servir. George would later introduce me and our Chicago Urban Ed students to his family, Greek food and Greek town in Chicago. Beyond the content and classroom, current sophomore and last year's conference basketball newcomer of the year, Kyle Ayton, has taught my family life lessons as well. If anyone ever doubts the powerful ways in which Wabash students can serve as a mentor, brother, or father figure, you should see the excitement in my kids' eyes and hear their screams of joy when Kyle stops by to play basketball, football, soccer, baseball, golf, or any other sport that Kyle plays way better than I do. Kyle recently started reading to our youngest son, certainly extending his fluence beyond sports. He exhibits more patience with our kids than I could ever imagine, a good example and reminder to both me and my wife. My kids' admiration for Kyle illustrates the ways in which he engages his power of privilege to benefit the lives of others. In true Wabash spirit, as my title suggests, Wabash always meets. It's easy to be consumed by the daily grind of classes, labs, clubs, athletic commitments, and to forgo the endless opportunities of lunchtime or evening guest lectures. However, I encourage you to take advantage of all these opportunities because you never know who you'll meet and what opportunities will come your way. Last year, when Dr. Jane Hardy traveled abroad to present at an international conference on literacy and extensive reading, she asked others in the department to cover her classes. I look forward to the opportunity, a chance to help a fellow colleague centered around Spanish, a true passion of mine. In the end, I'm sure this comes as no surprise, it was working with students that I enjoyed the most. That short time allowed me to connect with Zach Maciejewski and Jared Burris. 1 year later, I've hired Zach to work in our Dean of Students office and as a student assistant to my freshman tutorial. Jared, or JB, as I so originally nicknamed him, or so I thought, greeted me every day this summer as I entered Lilly Library. And we've shared many good conversations about running. Keep in mind that getting to know both Zach and JB started with a simple gesture to help a colleague and engage in others my passion. Another passion of mine is running. Last month I ran the Chicago Marathon, my first ever, and perhaps last. The day before the race, I had posted a few comments and pictures on Facebook about the upcoming 26.2 miles. Many people liked my status and made comments. Ben Bradshaw and Liz Rayburn both wrote, "Wabash always fights." As we all know, this phrase is commonly used and often used rather loosely. Consequently, I nearly overlooked these comments without much thought or consideration. However, with 26.2 miles before me and my first ever marathon, I needed all the encouragement, motivation, and inspiration I could get. Throughout the race, I repeatedly said to myself, "Wabash always fights." Upon doing this, I could hear the echoes of our students from the 90s to the early 2000s to present day shouting the same. By mile 21 or 22, when my muscles began to tighten, my own intensity of Wabash Always Fights increased. Covered in sweat and a not so favorable stench, it was at this point when I clenched a fist and pounded my thighs to go, go, go. In these last miles, I realized that I would be forever grateful for such mantra, Wabash Always Fights, and for those simple but powerful posts by Ben and Liz. A run wouldn't be complete, especially a marathon, without thinking of and being inspired by Coach Morgan and our All-American runner, Joey Conti. The city of Chicago and its 19 neighborhoods certainly turned up that day for 26.2 miles of people cheering, yelling, and encouraging people they didn't even know. In the end, they allowed me to turn up to not only complete the marathon, but well within my goal. In closing, I hope that this chapel talk offers you a different perspective on meetings. Whether it be a class meeting, one-on-one meeting with faculty, staff, or a coach, formal or informal, remember the privilege that you have for such unique opportunities and relationships. Collins closes his book, Good to Great, with this: when all the pieces come together, not only does your work move toward greatness, but so does your life. For in the end, it is impossible to have a great life unless it is a meaningful life. And it is very difficult to have a meaningful life without meaningful work. Perhaps then you might gain that rare tranquility that comes from knowing that you've had a hand in creating something of intrinsic excellence and that makes a contribution. Indeed, you might even gain that deepest of all satisfactions, knowing that your short time here on this earth has been well spent and that it mattered, end quote. Now more than ever, my role as Associate Dean of Students has offered me, and hopefully others, great meaning and satisfaction in the spirit of greatness. This is due in large part because of meetings with many of you, especially with campus leaders like Scott Prucker, Grant Klimbara, Austin Myers, Corey Egler, Hezekiah, who needs no last name, Ethan Farmer, Nick Schenkel, just to name a few. Dean Raiders, Mr. Woods, and I kicked off the year by visiting all dorms and fraternities. During our time together, I shared with students that I was certainly pro-fraternity, but that I was also pro-independent as well. In the end, I'm pro-do the right thing, pro-gentleman's rule, pro-Wabash. If you haven't already, I hope you soon discover your own meaning of Wabash Always Fights, for it's not until you have your own fight or struggle and then triumph that you really get the meaning of such expression. Wabash always meets, but more importantly, Wabash always fights. Thank you.
All right, before we continue, let's get a shout out to the soccer team for tying against DePaul yesterday and moving on to the next round. All right, this weekend, swimming is home on Friday versus DePaul, so make sure to come out and show your support. On Saturday, we have cross country at Denison for the NCAC championship. Soccer is against Worcester, and football is at Hiram. Please rise and sing Old Wabash. From his